So hello world. Yeah. We're getting ready for a webinar. Oh, excuse me. And I know Twitch takes its good old time, you know, telling people that we're live. So yeah, we're starting early. Also, we might make a bingo. Actually, we probably will make a bingo. Sorry, I know my audio's kind of spiking somewhere and I don't know where. There. We'll just do that. So yeah. Hello everyone. Have some Cheerios, Tinker. And yeah. We're just gonna chill. We'll wait for this webinar. Might as well get everything set up. So hope you all have had a wonderful day today. And I must complete and submit a survey to receive my certificate. Oh. Apparently I'm going to earn a certificate for this. So they're using Adobe Connect, which is what I'm getting set up right now. I know you can't see any of this. And I know I'm just talking to myself right now, and that's okay. I've done this before. And yeah. Okay. So let me pull up the page. Meow, says the cat. I am actually going to have to get up and take a short break to feed the cat, because it will be his dinner time in a second. It's always his dinner time though. Oh, this does not want to go full screen. Anyways, I will show you what I'm looking at in a second. So I don't know why it doesn't want to go full screen. So I am an informal educator, and they're saying I should be able to, oh no, they said no sound. So the no sound is potentially everybody, but also me. I'm gonna give you the dogs for a second. Alright, well, there's not much to look at for the professional screen, but we have it up. We have it up. And For whatever reason, it is not telling people we're live. Alright, so hold on, Tinker. We're gonna keep an eye on that. Might as well get our bingo ready. Need to set this up. Do. Hey, DPI. Aha, that went full screen. I have the thing up. Yeah, I do need to kick a bot. I don't know why this doesn't want to go full screen. I may have to log in on Chrome, I guess? It's weird. So I'll show you what I'm looking at. Yeah, kick some bot, because the bot isn't working right. So we're really early for this webinar, and I'm kind of annoyed because it won't let me do it full screen. It doesn't seem to matter what I do. It won't let me let it go full screen. I apparently cannot, like, I answered the poll. I did their instructions, leaving my name and email address. Yeah, it's Adobe Connect. I'm not a fan, but it's what they chose to use. And compared to the other thing that we listened into for Late Sale, like, I think I actually prefer this because it's more computery based versus a phone-in system. So, oh, we have to log out and log back in anyways. This is how broken it is. Alright, alright. So with that, let me put up Bingo Baker. So I guess I just have to close this. We'll try it in Chrome. Yeah, of course we're gonna play bingo. It's me. What are you talking about? Alright. So let me copy the link. How slow is it, though? That's what I want to know. Oh no, I've been up for a while. It just posted. That's after I had been up for a bit. So it's more than a 2-minute delay. Because I'd been up for a minute or two. Yes. Open the installer. I think the API is lagging again, which, I mean, I don't blame it. It's downloading. Okay, now what? Click yes to run. Then I have to come here and launch Adobe Connect. Oh wow, this is way different. All right. Looks like I have to fix things again. Where is it? Connect? There we go. That's not what I meant to happen, but that's what happened. me... There we go. Next, 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 next. Close. Alright, so now we need to test their sound. So, select speaker. Oh, that's no good. I think that's the one I want. Yeah, no, it's not doing anything. Yeah, I have an Asus monitor. I have 2 of them, actually. They match. They totally match. Nope, nope, nope. I don't want to uninstall. I want to connect. Really? See, I knew I should have... Adobe Connect. Where are you? There we go. So I need to give it the URL again. Paste. Continue. None of my monitors match. Feels bad, man, but at least I got 3 going. I could have 4 going. I could have a total of 4 going. But I don't. I feel like I'm spiking with my video. Select speaker. Shh. I said I could have 4. I say I don't have 4. Just run 2. To run 4, I think I need another graphics card and an actual mount for all the monitors on my desk, and then I might need counterweights on my desk to make sure it doesn't topple over from all the extra weight. So yeah, yeah, I only have 1 graphics card. Yeah, I don't have an onboard graphics card either. Oh, they're doing a sound check. I still can't hear them. Like, and I know I don't have that line muted.
Let me see if that.
All engine running.
50 years ago, we
Right.
pioneered a path to the moon.
Go for landing.
The trail we
I
blazed
have it on
cut through the
thing.
fictions of
1
science
second.
and showed us all.
There we go. Now it's on the right thing.
Today, our calling to explore is even greater.
So I'm going to
To go farther, we must be able to sustain
unduck
mission.
this and I'm going to unduck this, which I know a lot of you are going quack, quack, quack. yeah, I'm going to undock this. I'm going to make this full screen, and I'm going to feed the zoo, quite frankly, because if I don't do that, they will be bugging me. They'll be bugging me for a while. So I feel like I'm missing something here. All right. So while I'm gone and my microphone is muted, think of bingo terms, and we'll, you know, play some bingo during this. I should only be a minute or two. It doesn't take me long to feed everybody. So I will be right back. And yeah, think of bingo. Okay. All right. So will this go full screen? Nope. That's as good as it's gonna get, apparently. So yeah, that's as good as it's gonna get. Okay. So let's flip over to bingo. And if we hear any more noises from them, we know what's going on. So this is the Orion Abort Ascent 2 Test Flight Webinar bingo. And I don't remember how to edit the bingo command in the thing. Propellant, Orion, abort, escape, safety, commercial partners. Did I spell that right? No, I didn't. Commercial partners, Boeing. Yeah, but how do you edit a command? Paranor is always here for that. Moon, Mars, Artemis, crewed mission. This is for educators, so I'm going to add students. Professional development. NASA. Anybody else think of anything? Okay, I'll have to try that after we generate the card, because I don't get a number for it till after I hit generate. Just trying to pull up the Adobe Connect thing. And okay. tabbing through things, making sure I didn't miss anything. All right, but we have half the card filled out, so we need more cards, or we need more things. Orion's can be used with SLS, right? Right. See if I can pull up anything else from the email. I don't know. Nightbot's weird. So this email says, this summer NASA plans to conduct a Ascent Abort 2 flight test. This milestone event will verify flight capabilities of Orion's launch abort system, a key step in fulfilling NASA's mission to go back to the moon and then on to Mars. During this free 60-minute webinar, educators will have a chance to hear from Orion flight test engineer about AA-2 test and then critical role mass properties plays in spacecraft design. Webinar will also highlight NASA resources and hands-on activities for engaging your students with Orion and AA-2. Webinar addresses NGSS PS1, PS2, and ETS1. So trajectory. I'm just going to put, we have abort, so I'm just going to put launch abort system. Flight test. Test engineer, because I bet you they'll say that. Mass. Nominal. Always should have nominal. Toss in the dogs barking, because might as well. Now we only need 2 more squares. This is... We have professional development. We have NASA. Do we have educator? DBA? Oh, Drop Bear, do you have any thoughts? We literally need 1 more square. Something breaks with the webcast. Walker, you got any suggestions? That's as good as a second free spot. Webcast breaks. Perfect. We're going with this. This is what we're doing. All right. Generate. And then I don't need a call list. And I will play off the same card you guys are playing off of. So here's that. So we're going to try commands, edit, play bingo, current bingo card. I hear my dogs barking outside. Current bingo card. All right. Play bingo. There we go. It worked. Yes! All right, and close pretzel because we don't need pretzel open. And close that. And I hear music. So again, if you've never played bingo before, click generate card. Okay, I understand. And that's my bingo card. I have so many things open. I'm actually going to move my card, I think. I don't know. Yeah, no, I'm not on Discord. I mean, I could be on Discord, but I'm not going to. I'm actually going to mute and deafen just in case I accidentally join a server. Okay. Okay, so I think I might actually take my bingo card down. Yeah, free box is free. Oh, shoot, I never switched scenes, did I? I sure didn't. Let's see if I can make this a little bit bigger. Since they don't seem to believe in letting me make things full screen. It is some really dramatic music. I should probably duck it, huh? Duck it, duck it, duck it. Alright. Alright. This is a little drastic, but I feel like... You know what? Let me turn off the doggy cam, because I doubt the dogs are going to be around much. So this is the best I can make it look. I'm also going to turn off my bingo card because, let's be honest, there's a lot happening on the screen. I guess I could move the bingo card over to where the dogs are. Why is it still... I told it no, and yet here it is, still all... Oh my. Okay, fine. You want to be up? You want to be up? I'll make you up. We'll just put you over here. Just trying to crop pad. There we go. We now have yeah, they asked us to do that. They asked us to do that. So I guess for now what I can do is this. It's not perfect. But they literally asked us to do this. Trying to adjust it now. Okay, there we go. So that's the best I can do to keep, you know, email addresses hidden. I'm sure somebody's going to complain about the glare, so I'll go ahead and take my glasses off. My new glasses come in tomorrow, by the way. So let me add a marker. And yeah, I'm excited. The realization that, like, I was annoyed at how much I ended up having to spend. Yeah, it is Adobe Connect Drop Bear. I am not thrilled about the fact that I had to, about the amount of money I paid to get glasses, but when you take into account that my first pair was free, I'm like, okay, $110 for one pair of glasses.
And welcome to NASA Langley Research Center. We're going to go ahead and start the program in a moment, but what we need to do is, you'll see on the screen, we have a welcome message, and we also have a couple of items that we'd like you to do real quick before we actually start the program formally. First one is that hopefully you're able to hear me, and so if you're not able to hear me, please let us know in the chat box. Second thing is there's a poll there. We'd like to know where our audience is teaching, what grade levels. So please fill out the poll. And the last thing is, if you would please put your name and your email address in the chat box. That helps us with attendance purposes, and I'll explain that in a few moments. So I'm going to give everybody a moment or two to complete certainly the poll and the entering of your name and your email address in the chat box if you have not already, and then we will go ahead and get started. So I'll give you a moment or two, please.
All right, so they're going to start in a minute or two. So my glasses were $110 because the frames were $35, which I thought was reasonable. And the filter, I got the fancy sit at the computer all day glasses. So they filter blue light, they filter UV, and they're anti-reflective. And so my lenses cost $75. So to me, $110, considering I didn't pay for the first pair, isn't bad, because it kind of, right now it averages out to $55.
So hopefully you've had a chance to do the poll, and you've had a chance to do
and here we go,
your name and email address in the chat box. So what we're going to do is real quickly, my name is Dr. Ann Weiss, and I am very excited to welcome you to our program this evening. We have some great guests with us this evening who will be talking to you about Orion Ascent Abort Flight Test and also NASA's return to the moon. But before we get started, what I'd like to do is I'd like to go over a few items. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and give you an introduction to our schedule for today. So as I mentioned, we're going to have discuss a little bit NASA's return to the moon and Artemis mission. We have with us Kristen Damadeo, who I'll bring on set here with me in just a moment. A little bit later in the program, we'll actually talk about the Orion launch abort system and the Ascent Abort 2 flight test, which is actually coming up next week. So we're very excited around here at NASA for that. We will actually have a flight engineer from the program. She's actually Deputy Lead, Amanda Cutright, and she will talk to you about Orion and the launch abort system and the work that she's been doing to get ready for next week's flight test. And then what the second half of the program, we will actually introduce to you some instructional activities that you can do with your students, either in an informal setting like a library or maybe a summer camp, or when you get back to school in the fall with your students. Now, a couple of things to keep in mind during the program. Because we have a lot of information for you this evening, we're going to ask that you use the chat box that you've been using to enter your names and your email address. Use that to answer, or excuse me, ask any questions during our question and answer session. We're actually going to hold taking questions until the very end of the program. We have about 15 minutes scheduled at the end of the program to take your questions. So please keep those questions handy, and we will answer them before we finish this evening. The other thing that I'd like to point out, particularly for our teachers, and this is the reason why I had you put your name and your email address in, is that tonight you're able to earn professional development credits. After the program, or at the end of the program, I'll describe a little bit about how that works. But for you teachers, you'll be able to get proof that you were actually here this evening for you to take to your licensing office. And so what we're going to do now is I'm actually going to bring on a camera our first guest. As I mentioned, her name is Kristen Damadeo, and we're happy to have you with us tonight.
Hi, thanks, Anne. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me. So I work in the Public Affairs Office here at NASA Langley, and I wanted to give you a brief overview of our current mission called Artemis, which is our return to the moon and our journey to Mars after that. And so I'm going to start off by playing an inspirational video that explains a little bit about what we're planning.
50 years ago, we pioneered a path to the moon. The trail we blazed cut through the fictions of science and showed us all what was possible.
It's very pretty out here.
Today, our calling to explore is even greater. To go farther, we must be able to sustain missions of greater distance and duration. We must use the resources we find at our destinations. We must overcome radiation, isolation, gravity, and extreme environments like never before. These are the challenges we face to push the bounds of humanity. We're going to the moon to stay by 2024, and this is how.
This all starts with the ability to get larger, heavier payloads off planet and beyond Earth's gravity.
For this, we designed an entirely new rocket.
The Space Launch System. SLS will be the most powerful rocket ever developed.
And with components in production
And more in testing?
This system is capable of being the catalyst for deep space missions
we need a capsule
that can support humans from launch
through deep space and return safely back to Earth. For this, we built Orion.
This is NASA's next generation human space capsule.
Using data from lunar orbiters that continue to reveal the moon's hazards and resources.
We're currently developing an entirely new approach to landing and operating on the moon.
Using our commercial partners to deliver science instruments and robotics to the surface, we are paving the way for human missions in 2024.
Our charge is to go quickly and stay, to press our collective efforts forward with a fervor that will see us return to the moon in a manner that is wholly different than 50 years ago.
We want lunar landers that are reusable,
That can land anywhere on the lunar surface. The simplest way to do so is to give them a platform in orbit around the moon from which to transition.
An orbiting platform to host deep space experiments and be a waypoint for human capsules. We call this lunar outpost Gateway.
The beauty of the Gateway is that it can be moved between orbits
It will balance between the Earth and Moon's gravity.
in a position that is ideal for launching even deeper space missions.
In 2009, we learned that the moon contains millions of tons of water ice.
This ice can be extracted and purified from water, separating oxygen for breathing or hydrogen for rocket fuel.
The moon is quite uniquely suited
to prepare us and propel us to Mars and beyond.
This is what we are building.
This is what we're training for.
This we can replicate throughout the solar system.
This is the next chapter of human space exploration.
Humans are the most fragile element of this entire endeavor, and yet we go for humanity. We go to the moon and on to Mars to seek knowledge and understanding and to share it with all. We go knowing our efforts will create opportunities that cannot be foreseen. We go because we are destined to explore and see with our own eyes. We turn towards the moon now, not as a conclusion, but as preparation, as a checkpoint toward all that lies beyond. Our greatest adventures remain ahead of us. We are going.
We're going.
We are going.
We are going. We're going.
So I hope you enjoyed that video. I think the link will be sent around, so you're welcome to use that in your classrooms and watch it again if you would like. So this Orion Ascent Abort 2 test that's coming up next Tuesday on July 2nd that Amanda is going to tell you more about the launch abort system. This is part of our Moon to Mars Artemis mission. The Orion spacecraft is going to be used to send astronauts to the moon in 2024 and on to Mars. So I just want to tell you a little bit about our plan. So a lot of people ask, why are we going back to the moon? And we're going back this time not to just leave a flag and footprints, but we are going to establish a permanent presence, a human presence, robotic presence, and we're going to use that as a test bed to send astronauts on to Mars. And so there's a lot of reasons why we're going back. We're going to get more science, we're going to develop new technologies that are relevant to us here on Earth, and we're going to establish a new global lunar economy working with international partners and industry partners. Next slide, please. So we're calling this new Moon to Mars, Moon 2024 program Artemis, which is Apollo's twin sister. And so that is what the mission is called. Similar to how the Apollo program was named Apollo, this whole new exploration mission is called Artemis. So if you see Artemis in the news on nasa.gov, it's referring to Orion, it's referring to our Space Launch System rocket, it's referring to the gateway that you heard about in that video, it's referring to the whole program of putting people back on the moon in a sustainable way by 2024. So this is our timeline of how we're going to get people back to the moon. Again, the Artemis program will send people back in 2024, the first woman and the next man from the United States. And we're going to start off by sending robotic landers and robotic missions, and then people, and then that sustainable presence will come after that. So how we're going to get there is using our Space Launch System, as I mentioned, and the Orion spacecraft that will be able to launch humans further into space than ever before and keep them safer than we ever have before with the Orion spacecraft and the launch abort system on board. That's going to be tested next week. So the gateway, which you heard about in the video, is this orbiting platform that'll be used to really give us that sustainable element. So the astronauts will be able to go to and from the gateway and do science for a more sustained period of time than if they were just going to go to the moon and then come back to Earth. It gives us that in-between point where they can change out, where they can refuel, where they can send experiments. So similar to the space station, but slightly less complex. And then this will also be a breaking off point for going from the moon to Mars in the future. Some of the science that we're hoping to get involves in situ resources, so drilling for water on the surface of the moon, especially at the South Pole, which is our target location, and then working with landers and rovers to learn more about other resources that we might be able to use to help us stay there more sustainably and go on to Mars from the moon. Technology is another key area that we're looking to expand on. We're going to need a lot of new technologies to go back to the moon in the way that we want to, and to go on to Mars. And so this test bed will give us a chance to test all of these new technologies on the moon before people go further into space to Mars and beyond. And a lot of these technologies that are developed for these missions, even going back to Apollo, end up having real consequences, real benefits to us back here on Earth. So again, after 2024, we're hoping to really build out a sustainable presence into 2028 and beyond, where people are living and working on the moon, on the gateway, going back and forth, drilling and using the resources on the surface of the moon, bringing science back to Earth, bringing these technologies back to Earth, and practicing for what will be an even longer, more difficult mission to Mars. So expanding on that science that I mentioned with the in-situ resources, how we can use that water for not just drinking, but for fuel to get onto Mars, and other resources that we might not even know about yet because we haven't been there for long enough. So just in closing, we are going back to the moon, as the video said, forward to the moon in 2024 with the first woman and the next man, and we're excited about it. And this Orion Ascent Abort 2 is a critical milestone on that path to the moon in 2024. So I just wanted to say thank you, Anne, for having me on, and I will be sticking around to answer questions at the end of the program if anyone has them, and I think you'll share our contact information as well. So yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Sure will. And Kristen, we do greatly appreciate you taking the time to share with us what is going on with NASA, the return to the moon.
Great.
So
thank you.
So with that having been said, we're now going to shift focus a little bit, and we're going to now bring on our next guest. And as I mentioned, she's actually a flight test engineer. Actually, she'll give you a little bit more background about her role here at NASA and her role with the Ascent Abort 2 mission and the flight test next week. And so what we're going to do is have her have some time to actually talk about the really nitty-gritty specific details. And so when she has the opportunity to, at the end of the program, answer any questions that you might have about the technical components of next week's flight test. So Amanda Cutright's now joining us on camera. Hello, Amanda.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Excited.
Yeah, we're very excited to have you here. It's not often that we have a subject matter expert with us to talk to us about the actual mission. So what I'm going to do is I'll give you an opportunity here to introduce yourself.
Okay. Yep, I'm Amanda Cutright. I work here at NASA Langley Research Center in the Engineering Directorate, and I'm supporting the Orion Flight Test Management Office that's out of NASA Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. And I'm serving as the Systems Engineering and Integration Team Deputy lead there. So I'm going to talk a little bit about an overview of the mission. So, Kristen talked about Artemis and the scope of why and where, and I'm going to get into a little bit more detail on this particular piece of that bigger puzzle. If you go into the next slide, she mentioned the Space Launch System, and as educators, and sometimes when I'm talking with students, sometimes I ask them, do you guys like quizzes and tests? And they all say no. And I said, okay, I tell you what, no more quizzes or tests, and after 4 years of school, you're just going to have one really big exam. And then they go, oh no, wait, actually, I think I want those quizzes and tests. I go tell them to go back and tell their teachers that they want more quizzes and tests. And so I mentioned that to say for this Space Launch System, we don't want to wait till the very end to have a complete big exam systems test when we launch Artemis 1 or 2. We want to test pieces and parts as we go along. So this is a flight test for us, a little bit bigger than a quiz. It's a flight test for us. So this is the Space Launch System, the whole rocket. But if you look at the top part of the rocket, and if you go to the next slide, please, this is the Orion on SLS. So this is the crew module that's going to take the astronauts to these destinations and these locations. And the service modules behind it with the solar panels you see there. So one of the unique things that we learned from our past is we want to be able to safely escape our precious cargo, the astronauts, at any point in time during the launch. So if you go on to the next slide, please. So they've developed a launch abort system, a safety escape system that during any point during the launch. So this is a little bit of the timeline of throughout this exploration systems development. So Pad Abort 1 or PA1, we conducted a flight test in 2010 where we were literally just sitting on a launch pad in White Sands, New Mexico, and we practiced this abort. So, that was one of our tests, you could say. Again, we do a lot of quizzes before that of each individual pieces, but that was an integrated system test of the launch abort system. Exploration Flight Test 1 also launched to test, they had different test objectives, right? But that brings us to where we are right now for the Ascent Abort 2 flight test. So when SLS launches, there's some challenging environments, as you can imagine, from the thrust of the rocket, but also the atmosphere and flying through the atmosphere. So that's why we want to attest during ascent, and we want to do that before Artemis 1 and especially before Artemis 2, when there will be crew on board. So if you go to the next slide, please, just to give you a little bit of the configuration of this Ascent Abort 2 flight test vehicle, I'm actually going to start at the bottom first. So at the bottom, we call this the Abort Test Booster. Inside is an SR-118 Peacekeeper. But then we made this structure to mimic the top part of the Space Launch System. So, inside there is a solid rocket motor, but then we have the structure going out. Now I'm going to go back to the top of the rocket. What you see in this visual is the launch abort system. And that's the piece that we're testing. But in order to conduct that test, what you don't see visually in this picture, you have to visualize is the crew module is hiding inside there in that shape. And for this particular case, because of the objectives for this test, we're using what we call a boilerplate. So it's a crew module. It simulates the mass properties, how much it weighs, where that center of balance is, and the outer shape, or we call it the outer mold line. So it's simulating the pieces that we need from an actual Orion crew module, but we were able to develop it more cost-effective and quickly. And then we have a separation ring to help us with the transition of mounting, if you will, our payload. We call it the flight test article. and that is on the abort test booster, and the whole configuration for this flight test is called the flight test vehicle. So in a way, the abort test booster is a moving launch pad for us. We have a rocket on top of a rocket, and we're gonna test that payload after the rocket below us launches from the launch pad. So I wanted to give you that context to give you an idea. If you go to the next slide, this is just kind of the points throughout the launch, but what I'm going to do is talk you through a video that shows this in animation, which always helps tell the story. So this is sitting on the Space Launch Complex 46 at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. It's sitting on the launch stand as we speak. This is obviously the simulated visual. So when it launches, the abort test booster is just trying to get us to specific test conditions. The whole duration of this test is under 3 minutes. So, it happens pretty quickly, actually. So after the abort test booster launches, and when we're in the right test conditions, you're about to see the launch abort system abort from the rocket. So the abort motor fires, and that is simulating getting the crew away to safety, but not just getting them away from the rocket. Now you'll start to see the attitude control motor is kind of towards the tip of the nose there. So it is reorienting. You can see it's a control system. It's, there's a computer in there controlling it. And then once it gets the crew module heat shield down, now it's going to jettison away from the crew module. So there's 3 solid rocket motors in the launch abort system, and this test is practicing all of them. If you watch closely, you'll start to see some little orange pieces come out of the crew module. That's part of our data. We are telemetering data down to various ground stations, but as a backup, because the data is so important to this test. It's pressure, accelerometers, temperatures, etc. And that's why we're conducting this test. So we want to make sure that we get that data, so we have some redundancy in there, and we'll go recover those items that were the data that was stored on those ejectable data recorders. So if you go to the next slide, this is just an overview of the profile of the launch, the crew module versus the launch abort system, and gives you an idea of the altitudes. Where we abort is right around 31,000 feet. So if you happen to be in Florida, go look. You can see it outside from the beach. And what I think will make this one kind of interesting is the abort portion of it. It's not just going to launch and go to space. You're going to see all this activity. Take your binoculars if you're down there, but you'll be able to see the reorientation. And if you're not there, don't worry, it'll be online showing you with the cameras that are trying to follow the vehicle. So one of the roles that I have is regarding mass properties, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that later. So it's the weight and the weight distribution of all the components. So the reason we're flying Ascent Abort 2, you see on here, and this is a summarized version of a really long document that talks about our flight test objectives, but it gives you an idea. We want to show that we can demonstrate, we can safely separate the crew module and get it away from the launch vehicle. And then there's, this is a little bit of more of the technical. We're looking at the acceleration, the flight path, the Mach number, the pressure on there, what the angle is. And the point that I wanted to make is in that box in the middle is that as mass properties engineers, understanding the weight of everything and where it's located is an input into almost all the analyses and feeds into, the reason for the flight test objectives. So that's why I wanted to say why it's so important. If you go to the next slide, I also want to mention our team. I know there's a lot of letters on here, but just suffice it that across the country, there's various organizations, various teams. We're here at NASA Langley, but we coordinate with team members at Goddard headquarters, NASA KSC in Florida, and various partners at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, the Flight Test Office, and the Program Office for Orion at NASA JSC. The Abort Test Booster is out in Arizona, and then they have an independent verification and validation contractor. Lockheed Martin is the prime contractor for Orion, and they have a lot of subsystem components that come from all over the place. And then at NASA Armstrong Flight Research Center, we have our DFI, which is we call it our developmental flight instrumentation. So those are all those sensors that I was talking about. So there's a lot of people across the country that coordinate together in order for these few minutes or seconds of this flight test. So thanks to all of them for all their hard work to get us where we are right now. If you go to the next slide, this just kind of gives another overview of, I kind of walked through the flight test vehicle versus the payload and the different pieces and parts. So we actually built the crew module and the separation ring structure here at Langley. So we were able to do some measurements, also show some pictures in a minute. But the flight test office does the overall vehicle integration and the test authority going forward. But we rely on the whole team to help support integrated, systems analysis of all the things that need to be analyzed and understood well before we launch. And then the operations of just putting it together with all these pieces and components and mechanisms. If you go to the next slide, so just again, kind of focusing in on the mass properties part. So I helped coordinate, but we have individual representatives from each of these systems. So obviously Northrop Grumman Innovation Systems, they're responsible for the abort test booster. That's their part. But the separation ring actually stays with them when the launch abort vehicle leaves. And then we had NASA Langley responsible for, making sure, and I'll explain in a minute, the ballast system that we had to dial in to our envelope. And then Lockheed is responsible for their launch abort system and also to help integrate some of those pieces together. Go to the next slide, please. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of an idea, this crew module is really, it's I-beams inside and structure, and then there's a floor that has our computers in it. This is kind of a focus on, I mentioned pad abort 1 before, we only had 78 places where we could install ballast. This time we actually needed more mounting locations, but what's the same is we're targeting a certain center of gravity, and then we have some adjustability. So we needed to have this system that was modular and flexible, as our requirement may have changed over time. And uncertainties is also really important because you have a nominal that you're aiming for, but you take a measurement and you need to understand what your confidence in that measurement is. If you go on to the next slide, I think I start to show you some pictures here. This is inside the pad abort 1 crew module that's actually in the Air and Space Center in Hampton. But again, the design was very similar, and you see those ballast bricks. They're just steel chunks that are placed at various places in the crew module. So just to give you an idea a little bit of what it looks like inside there. If you go to the next slide, this is again, back on pad abort 1. We had some test equipment that we wanted to take a mass properties measurement of the plane of the center of gravity. In our case, it's Y and Z, if you're thinking like a coordinate system. But you see the red jacks, and then there's blue load cells above them. So we measured at 3 points the load, and then analytically computed where we believe the center of gravity was at that point. I know we'll do an exercise later that'll give you a feel for that as well. But we also wanted longitudinal or up and down on the crew module. So we had to get a little creative. This was the first vehicle that an Orion of this scale, of this size, needed to measure the weight and then the precision of the center of gravity. So if you go to the next slide, so we came up with an innovative method to see how far they would let us tilt it. And we came up with a slightly different setup, same concept of we had load cells at 3 different points. So we tilted it as far as we could, but we had a lot of lessons learned there. And we said, okay, if we're gonna do production Orion, we probably need to come up with an even better method. If you go to the next slide, I will mention that we did successfully launch pad abort 1. Here's some pictures. If you go online, you can find videos watching it launch. And as we would say, we would have saved the crew that day. We were very successful in all of our flight test objectives there. And if you go to the next slide, now we're getting into the Ascent Abort 2 crew module. So it looks awfully similar. It is actually slightly different on the outer shape, had evolved through the design process, but you see the same hardware underneath that. So we use the same hardware. Again, we're just trying to be efficient with our resources. Took a center of gravity measurement and weight. Here at NASA Langley, this picture you see is actually the structure and the ballast. So we made a guess at where we should install our ballast. If you go to the next slide, and then over time, what Lockheed Martin did, based on our lessons learned from pad abort 1, is they built this brand new structure specific to just Orion that allows them to rotate the crew module 90 degrees so that we can measure that longitudinal CG with much more precision. So they had conducted that design. We built a copy of it. That structure is actually now at Kennedy Space Center, and it's used as a backup for the system that they already had. And they're actually going to be using one of the components of it here literally in the next 2 or 3 days. So it was a good thing that we had this redundancy and backup for them. So keep an eye out for Orion, for Artemis 1 being measured pretty soon. If you go to the next slide, now that was just structure and ballast. So then the crew module got shipped to Houston, NASA Johnson, where they installed, they're the integrators for the crew module and separation ring. So they installed the computer systems, a lot of the sensors. You can kind of see yellow tape on the crew module covering some of the pieces. So again, we conducted this measurement where we rotated it 90 degrees. So that was our final measurement for the crew module. But I don't have pictures in here, but you can imagine we did similar things for the abort test booster pieces and the launch abort system, tower, and individual pieces. So suffice it to say, we do our analysis, but then you got to do tests to verify what your estimates are. If you go to the next slide, this shows, so we'll be launching, if you look at all the way down at the bottom in the right, it's Space Launch Complex 46. So that's where the rocket is right now as we speak. Some people are familiar, if you go back up to the red box on the top, the VAB, the Vehicle Assembly Building. A lot of people, that's kind of a landmark at Kennedy Space Center where the shuttle was integrated. The really tall building, if you've ever been there and seen it, or if you go look online, there's a picture of it there with the large American flag. So that's just kind of a reference point. The Launch Abort System facility is where we integrated the launch abort system to the crew module. And before that, we did some testing in the multi-payload processing facility. So that just gives you an idea. And then Hangar AE, that's the control room where the team will be to turn on the vehicle, make sure all the systems are nominal and go for launch. So this is an actual picture during one of our integrated tests. So we even do tests before our tests, right? We have to make sure everything comes on, that the data looks good. You see the lightning protection system tower in the background on the left with an isolator that if lightning strikes the cables, it isolates and distributes the lightning to protect our payload. And off to the right, you see what we call our mobile access structure. So normally that's in the service position around the vehicle. But in this case, we were doing a test to simulate launch day. So we had moved it back to what we refer to as the launch position. And we were checking out our systems in this case. So with that, I'll say thank you. That was a brief overview of Ascent Abort 2 with a little bit of a spin on mass properties.
Okay, well, thank you, Amanda. Mm-hmm. That was a lot of great information. I know sometimes we see the end product, but we don't really get an appreciation for all of the hard work that goes into making that actually happen. So that is amazing.
Thank you.
I do want to take an opportunity. I did see that one of our attendees had their hand up, and I'm going to apologize in advance because I may mispronounce your name, but Abi Manu, you had your hand up. If you have a question that we have not answered, if you could please type it in the chat box, and we'll try to answer that question right now because I noticed that you had your hand up. So if you still have that question, we'll give you a moment to type it in the chat box. So once we answer the question, then we'll go in. Amanda alluded to it. We're going to do some instructional activities now that you can do with students to share and make the connection between this flight test that's about to happen next week on July 2nd with your students, or even with your kids. Yes. We did this activity last year, and some of the big kids actually enjoyed these activities as well.
Meaning adults.
Yes. Yes.
And it really does span the ranges. I did this at the daycare even earlier today with the camp and the younger kids, so it does span the range.
Okay, so once again, I apologize if I mispronounced the name. Abhimanyu asked, do the computers do all the work, or are the mechanical engineers are the main controllers?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of if you're asking the question, forgive me if I get the context wrong, but we have engineers who are in the control rooms, turning on the vehicle, checking the systems, etc. But we do get to the point where we've set the countdown clock and the vehicle, is going to, operationally is going to launch. Like when we do the abort, it's looking for indicators that it's in the right test condition and the right point to conduct the flight test part of it. So in other words, the rocket launching, the little rocket at the top launching from the big rocket at the bottom is based on pre-planned engineering indicators, if I just kind of summarize it. I hope that was the context of the question there.
Now, I have a follow-up question to that because I know that sometimes I get a question about Okay, so when we actually have astronauts on board the rocket, are the astronauts going to have control, or is that all going to be controlled by computers if we have an abort situation?
Right, it's controlled by the computers.
Okay.
Yep, so we have spacecraft integrated global positioning system that knows where that vehicle is. And then we have other indicators that determine if there's a need for an abort. And, you know, there are a lot of different ways that could go. Just to give an example, on this particular flight test, we have pre-planned test conditions with which we will abort. But there's also an anytime abort scenario where if, you know, any of these other indicators, a break wire or something, then it will conduct its abort.
Okay. All right. Well, hopefully that answered Abhi Manu's question. And once again, I apologize if I mispronounced that. What we'd like to do now is we'd like to switch gears and go into an instructional perspective. But before we do that, we want to play a clip of a video from a TEDx talk that occurred a while back. It's from a gentleman called Richard Kulata. He used to be I think it was the chief of educational technology for the U.S. Department of Education. So we're just going to play a short clip about integrating technology in the classroom to kind of set the stage for what we're about to do with these instructional activities. So we'll go ahead and play that video clip for you right now.
But there's a more serious digital divide that we face in the country. And that is the divide between those who know how to use technology to reimagine learning and those who simply use technology to digitize traditional learning practices. When I was 14, I got this thing called a flatbed scanner. And it was kind of cool because you could take a picture like this. That's my little kiddo. You could put it on the flatbed scanner and it would turn that analog photograph into a digital photograph. Now, it didn't change the experience any. It's still a photograph. It was just a digital version of it. When I travel around the country and visit with schools, I see a similar thing happening with the way that we approach integrating technology. Maybe some of these examples will be familiar to you. We take a chalkboard and we digitize it. We take a textbook and we digitize it. We take a boring linear lecture and we make digital boring linear lecture. And my fear is that if we continue on this trajectory, very soon we will have successfully replicated in digital format exactly all of the traditional teaching methods that we use today. And I'm not sure that's what we want.
All right, so we use that as a way to indicate. So I didn't necessarily introduce myself at the beginning because I wanted to have an opportunity for you to hear from our guest speakers. But as mentioned, my name is Dr. Ann Weiss. I'm actually an educator professional development specialist here in the Office of STEM Engagement here at Langley. And so what we try to do in the office is we try to come up with innovative and immersive ways to get teachers and students and the general public excited about what NASA does, to take the things that Amanda and Kristen do and put them in the hands of the students, of the teachers, of the general public, so that they can understand what NASA does and get excited about it. And so one of the ways that we do that is by giving teachers resources through, for example, flipped classroom. And so up there, as you see with the slide there, so flipped classroom, if you're not already familiar with it, is a way where we kind of turn learning on its head. So normally, if you're like me, you've had classes where you sit in a lecture, the teacher's talking, and then you go home and you do homework problems, like, for example, math problems and stuff like that. And then you go back, you take a test, and then you go to the next topic. With the flipped classroom, this is a way to kind of turn it around. So instead of doing the lecture in class, the student actually listens to some videos or reads some material, et cetera, at home or in the library or something. And I want to make a note right now that I used to teach in a rural school district. And so I know sometimes for a rural school district, it's hard to get technology. So we understand that some of these approaches that we talked may not work for everyone, but we like to put these information in front of teachers so that they can adapt it to their unique local conditions. But getting back to the flipped classroom approach, this then allows the student to listen to the material at their own pace. They can go back, they can re-listen to material. And then they come to the classroom and they do what we would traditionally call homework. And this now allows the teacher to tailor their instruction. So if a student has got, let's say, integration, and they can move on. Now the teacher allows them to move on while they can work with a student who maybe is struggling with that particular topic. And so the flipped classroom is a way to individualize attention, but it's also a way to integrate technology. So for example, there's things like virtual reality field trips that NASA, the Office of STEM Engagement, is developing. And so these are ways now that we can start to integrate some of these technologies that our students may very well be using in their future career. So this is also a way to make connections with the workforce and the skills that our students are going to need when they're actually out in the workforce. And the last thing to come about workforce skills, that's not just the technical skills, it's also those soft skills, the ability to collaborate, the ability to communicate, the ability to write well. So this is one approach, and we understand that may not work for your situation, but it's one of the things that NASA STEM Engagement is using to guide the type of things that we do. And as I said, I'm an educator, professional development specialist. I do a lot of things online. The webinars are one thing, but we also do things called digital badges. And I'll talk a little bit more about one a little bit later, but it uses kind of the flipped classroom approach. We provide all of this material to the teacher. If you're not familiar with the digital badge concept, it's like a little mini course. It's between 5 and 7 hours, where you listen to videos, you read material, and then you put together a lesson plan, and then you demonstrate to NASA what you've done with the material that you've learned in that digital badge. And so it's kind of like a little bit of a flipped classroom approach. In that we give you that material, things like what Amanda had talked about and Kristen had talked about. We put that, and you learn that at your own pace, and then you incorporate it into a lesson plan, and you do that with your students or in an instructional setting, and then you submit that, and we're able to give you professional development credit for doing those things, and most school districts are accepting those things towards relicensing. And so what we want to do is we actually want to show you a couple of activities that take these ideas of mass properties, the things that you were talking about, Amanda, with mass and weight and center of gravity and balance. And what we want to do is we want to demonstrate some of these. So we have on the screen there, this is a overview. This is one of the things that's in a digital badge that we currently offer for mass properties and the Orion Ascent Abort 2 flight test. And Amanda and I are actually going to go ahead and do the activity. We're going to model it for you. And Amanda is going to do some commentary here for us. So.
Sure. So you take the popsicle stick and pretend like this is your launch abort system. Now that you've seen the video and heard us talk about it, you understand that. Except now we need to integrate our crew module. Oh, yes, and I forget, sometimes try to balance the launch abort system on your finger.
Okay, I'm that.
Yeah.
Nope.
There's a clue. It's really hard to do, but you will have students that try and have fun trying.
Yeah, I always tease them. I'm like, if you're able to do it, we'll give you a free ride on Orion.
Yeah, there you go.
And then there's always one student's like,
yep, trying to do it. So then we're going to integrate our crew module on here. So what I normally have them do is hold the launch abort system upside down and hold it like it's a T. And varying levels of kids. Sometimes the younger ones you got to help, but you'll wrap it around. You can do it once or twice, but the tighter you put on there, basically you just want it to stay. Okay. So you want it to do, and then you have your trick.
So of course I always, particularly if I'm working with little kids, I'll do this and I get them to giggle because I'll be like, okay, you got a cat or a dog at home? And of course I had somebody say that I'd have a rat or a mouse, but whiskers. Yeah. So, okay.
So now we've integrated our crew module, except it doesn't really look like a crew module yet. So then what we have them do is take the ends and twist them together. Now it's starting to make the shape. Now, all the students, they'll have different shapes, different sizes, different vehicles. So now the trick is you have a launch abort system and a crew module. So this is our launch abort vehicle. This is essentially what we're launching and testing on Ascent Abort 2. But after Ascent Abort 2, this component will be at the top of the SLS rocket as well.
Amanda, does it matter how my crew capsule looks? Does it have to be like yours?
It doesn't matter. See, even we're using the same pieces and parts, and actually the interesting part of that is your center of gravity, even though our weight is the same, your center of gravity is going to be totally different than mine.
Oh, because my capsule looks like
just because your capsule is a little bit different and a little bit bigger, okay? So now the trick is try to balance the launch abort system on your finger again. You can balance it on a pole, but most people like balancing it on their fingers. So as you can see, it keeps falling. So the center of gravity, because the stick weighs more, than the crew module. The center of gravity is somewhere up here. And with the older students, you could get them to calculate and measure and weigh and put a sticker of crew module or of the center of gravity marker on there if you wanted to.
Okay,
so now what we say is, okay, we're going to use our ballast blocks and we're going to add them onto our crew module. And we're going to see if we can balance it. Now, you can do it with any size paper clips. These are smaller. I've used bigger ones. And, you can evolve this in, make them guess how many you think it's going to take. Some of them will put them in different places. But the trick now is when you go to balance it, you've moved the center of gravity down below your finger. So it's able to balance. And I will tell you, it's almost get your camera ready when you give this to it. And this is where the adults get involved too, the adults or the kids, this is very rewarding. And then I tell them, congratulations, you're a mass properties engineer because you balanced your rocket. Now look at the difference between our two, right? And so that's kind of on this instructional too, is mass properties control where the vehicle is going to go. So your rocket's going to go sideways.
Ooh, that might not be a good thing.
Maybe not, but maybe sometimes. Actually, if you watch the Ascent Abort 2 video, I told the little kids this morning, we actually do go off to the side a little bit. So it just all depends on, what the objectives of your mission are. But some of them will try their hardest to get it to go straight up and down. And, so you can be very flexible with where you go with this. And then, you can have them experiment, if they needed to move their ballast blocks around a little bit and, see how the distribution of the weight changes where the center of gravity and where the point of balance is.
Right, and so I want to point out something. So if you take a look at Amanda's and mine, you'll notice that her pipe cleaner is further down the popsicle sticks, closer to her finger, whereas in mine, it's not. So in mine, of course, as Amanda pointed out, is pointing. So what I tell students is, okay, just go ahead and just slide it down, because of course, when you're making it, you don't realize it. And so if I do that, now mine is standing almost as upright as Amanda's. And one other thing that I wanted to point out, she mentioned you can use any type of paper clips, you can put them anywhere. And so it doesn't matter whether they're hanging like they are on mine or they're clipped like they are on Amanda's.
Right.
So there's a great deal of flexibility with this particular, it's deceptively simple, but there's a lot of different things that you can do with this.
And you can pull in the engineering design process, right? You made one decision with your design, but after your balance test, you learned something different. So you needed to change your design to get it to where you wanted.
Right. And you can also get like a little creative with this. So Amanda and I just used one pipe cleaner. The basic activity is just one pipe cleaner, one craft stick, and 4 paper clips. But there's nothing saying that you can't have your students get like uber creative and like make their space capsules however they want, right?
Yeah, they can make different payloads. You could say, oh no, somebody wanted to put some sensors up here. You could put a paper clip up here and then see how many more paper clips you had to add to the bottom. I mean, you could do just so many different iterations on this. And a lot of times the kids will lead the way too, but you can be strategic about giving them some different challenges or making them analytically compute, where they think it's going to be or what they need to do. There's a lot of flexibility here.
So while we tend to recommend, usually recommended grade levels, there's like maybe K through 5, maybe K through 4. As Amanda mentioned, the big kids are fascinated. So I did an event last summer. I had a 55-year-old NASA Langley engineer who was like just entranced by the fact. So
stayed at the table for a while.
Yeah,
and we've had high school events here where they come to learn about different careers and they just hover around the table and they're fascinated. And it gets them asking questions. And for some reason, balancing this on your finger is very rewarding.
Yes.
Yes. You feel like you've accomplished something.
Yes, and we're doing this within the context of a NASA flight test, but we've had some comments in the chat box that yes, the best way to make sure that this really resonates with the students is if they can tie it to something that they might be familiar with. So one of our attendees said something about seesaw. If you move the seesaw slightly, or you have 2 kids who are slightly different sizes, the same idea works, is how can you balance them? I remember when I was a kid, I was like, okay, let's see if we can balance it without our feet touching. So having context for them, the model is great for engineering design and testing, but being able to tie it to something that they can tie to their real world, real lives is very powerful in and of itself. And I mentioned that this is one of the activities in a digital badge that were created for Orion Ascent Abort Flight Test. It talks about the mass properties, and within it, there is a PDF actually of this activity. It's one of 4 instructional activities that we actually suggest for teaching mass properties. And so I'll give you a little bit of information about how to access the digital badge at the end of the program. But what I want to do real quick, because we are running out of time and I do want to take some more questions, is I want to do another activity which kind of talks a little bit about the calculation and being more technical, I guess is the appropriate thing. So one of the activities that we suggest in the digital badge for the older students, i.e. high school students, particularly because there are various rocket competitions where you design a rocket and then it has to carry payload. Team America Rocketry Challenge, for example, you have to design a rocket that carries eggs to a particular altitude and returns them safely. So in the badge, we actually have some information for how you can incorporate what Amanda's been talking about with mass properties into the design of a model rocket. So what you'll see here is a little fun. It's actually made of styrofoam. Got this from a conference, and we were launching these at each other. So it's made of styrofoam, but it is a rocket. It's hollow and it has fins, so it looks like it. And so when you have your students actually design and build a model rocket, as Amanda said, you want to make sure it goes where you want it to go. If it's tilted, it's going to go somewhere you may not want it to go. So there's 2 ways that you can actually calculate or find the center of gravity. So I'm going to show you the easy way here. You see I have a string here. And so if you tie the string to the fuselage and you go ahead and you hang it, the idea is that the rocket should be horizontal or parallel, I should say, with the surface. And as you can see here, it's not. It's tilted at a funny angle. So this is a simpler way. So what you could do is, okay, let's play around with this. So a lot of students will say, okay, well, I'll just move the piece of string down to where the fins are. Obviously, that's the center of gravity.
Because it's a cylinder, but then you've added these fins, so they do weigh more, and that's somewhat of a correct assumption that. Let me go closer to where all the weight is.
So I'll go ahead and I'll test that. So once again, we're doing testing and oops. All right, now we're going to make a big crater in the ground. That's not a good idea. So now they'll have to test and kind of figure out where is that center of gravity. And so you get that whole thing that Amanda was talking about, the iterations of testing and
closer.
All right, so that's closer. All right. All right.
That looks pretty good.
So I think that's
pretty close.
So I think that's
again,
about good.
I mentioned uncertainties earlier, so there's always a little bit of uncertainty method in your test.
Yeah.
That looks pretty balanced to me.
Okay, and as you notice, it's not near the fins. It's not even what it looks like would be the center of the fuselage. Okay, and so this is one way to do it. This is sort of the guesstimation. But if you really want to be precise, as Amanda and her colleagues are, then there is a way to do this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip to the slide here. As I said, this is part of another instructional activity. And this is actually information that is been provided by NASA Glenn Research Center in Cleveland, Ohio. And what you can see here is this way you can mathematically calculate that center of gravity. So Amanda, would you like to just quick walk through that?
And one of the important pieces is you always have to have a reference point. That's one of the most important things that we have, when you're measuring. So I like how they have the reference line, the blue line there all the way off to the side. And mass properties can get complicated, as you get into it, but the fundamental is really simple. It's how much does it weigh and where is it located? So you can think about breaking down, whatever piece, in this case, the rocket, into individual pieces. If you think through each piece individually and then you're adding them up together to get to the composite or the total, so it's really mass and the distance. And, we talk in terms of mass and gravity. So, it depends on what you're going for. If you want just the mass, then you have to take into consideration the gravity and remove that component. So you can kind of think of it in whichever way you want. We deal with mass because if we're going to space and there's variabilities in gravity, depending on where you're going or where you are, or honestly, what state you're in when you measure your components. So that, this is a very simplified version of what is the total weight and where is the system level center of gravity. And, in our case, we have thousands of line items in our database where we're tracking each one. But again, that's why, I showed those pictures where we do the integrated test, because we want to check and make sure that our analytical versus our test. So you could do something similar here. Have them, take each of the pieces and parts and think about, okay, this is a cylinder. This is where the center of gravity is for that piece. And then take this, you could add them all up. You could have a short little database. And then you could get them to guess. You could get them to measure, find their reference point. You could have a little sticker or draw on it with a marker or something and say, I think it's going to be here, but then have them do the test to see if they got it right, because they may or may not get it right. And then again, you can do things, adding. You'd be surprised how much weight. You could also, just thinking off the top of my head, you could add a little, I don't know, a rubber band or a sticker or, some sort of weight. And you could look at, okay, when I add that same component here, what does it do to change the center of balance or the center of gravity? Versus if I add it close to the center of gravity, it doesn't have as much of an effect because that distance is different, that moment arm we refer to. So that's something you have to think about, like when we're designing our rockets is, oh no, we need to add another electronics box. Well, is it small? Can we put it out here? Or is it larger? Do we need to add it here? On our Ascent Abort 2 flight test, we do have some of our developmental flight instrumentation towards the nose of the vehicle. So we had to compensate, for that. So there's some iterations you can get creative and think about it there too, but breaking it down piece by piece, the analytical version, and then test.
And of course, that also, you may also, as Amanda, we want to do both because as she mentioned in her portion, she's do a lot of measurements, but then you actually have to test to make sure that you got the right location for the center of gravity. So you can have your students calculate it, mark it here, and as you said, then test it. And that would be exactly what the NASA engineers do. Okay. All right. So I mentioned that we had a digital badge. We actually have a series of digital badges here at NASA, and there's approximately 30 of them, and they're all designed to cover particular topic areas. They're designed for a variety of age groups and things like that. So as I mentioned, there's about 30 of them. The badging system or micro-credential, all of these badges take somewhere between 5 and 7 hours to complete. They are backed by Texas State University's College of Education, so that's where they're usually accepted by school districts for professional development credit. And the website, the web link there is there on the screen. I'll put it in the chat box towards the end of the program so that you have that. But what you do is you go ahead and you create a login. You could use Facebook, you can use Google, you can even use LinkedIn. And once you've created your account, and there is something on the create account that asks for an invitation code, you can just ignore that. But once you've created your account and you've logged in, you can then view the catalog. And we're always adding new digital badges. So while there's 30 in there right now, we're always updating. So just keep an eye out if you don't necessarily see something that particularly touches on an area that you need to teach in class. Just hold on because we'll probably create something. But there on the screen is the actual badge that's been created for the Ascent Abort Flight 2. It's called Balancing Act Spacecraft Mass Properties. And basically what we try to do was we try to take the mission information, the Ascent Abort 2 that Amanda talked about. We tried to tie it in with workforce connections. What does a mass property engineer do? And then include those instructional activities that you can then make those connections with your students. And of course, we're talking about mass properties as the actual content topic. And so if you actually were to go into the badge, all of the badges are aligned because this is a national database of digital badges. They're aligned to the next generation science standards. We know that some states don't actually use NGSS. I'm going to give you some contact information. You can always contact me and I can help you figure out how to decipher how this fits in with your particular state standards. But each badge gives you a little background. It gives you the NGSS standards it's aligned to, and then it gives you basically the modules that you need to complete in order to earn that particular badge in the professional development credit. So at this point, as I mentioned, those are the email addresses there for the three of us who were on the program this evening. As I said, I'm with the Office of STEM Engagement. I do a lot of educator professional development and student events. Kristen Damadeo, as you said, is the public affairs specialist, and Amanda Cutright is our flight test manager. What was going to happen, and this is the reason why I had you give me your name and your email in the chat box. I'm going to send out a post-event survey email to you. It'll have a link to a survey. It's approximately 5 minutes long. It's a way for you to give us feedback as to what you thought of the program, what you liked, what you didn't like. And so once you complete the survey, the system will automatically generate a certificate of attendance, and that will be sent to you. And then that way, then you can print it and take it to your licensing office, and they can give you credit for having attended this evening's program. And as I mentioned, or should mention, if you do not receive that email within 24 hours of now, please send me an email so that I can make sure that I resend that. Sometimes we have issues with spam filters and stuff like that, so I just need to resend that. So if you don't get it within 24 hours, please let me know. We have been recording this evening's webinar because of the amount of information that has been presented. We understand that you may not have captured all of that. And going back to that whole flipped classroom, you can ask me for the recording link and I can send it. You can rewind, watch it however many times you want until you feel comfortable with the information. We can do that for you. And as last, before we start taking questions, last plug for the flight test. It's basically a week away. And it'll be the launch window is 7 to 11 a.m.
7 a.m. Eastern time is when it starts and goes until 11 a.m.
Okay. And are there any things that might prevent you from launching?
Basically weather. So watch the weather. We need to be able to see the vehicle in order to get some of the data we need. We need relatively clear weather. So
okay, and is there a backup date if the weather doesn't
the
cooperate?
next day is the backup day.
Backup day. Okay, all right. So hopefully it'll be July 2nd, early fireworks. If not, it will be the day before fireworks, hopefully. So July 2nd, early in the morning is when the launch window opens on NASA TV. And with that, we'll go ahead and if you have any questions, we'll start taking those. But I do want to say thank you very much for taking time out of your day to join us. And we hope you enjoyed this evening's program. So, thank you. So we'll go ahead and we'll see if we got any questions. Okay. All right. Okay, so we have from Leslie, she says, how do private commercial companies such as SpaceX, ULA, Boeing, and others fit into the overall space exploration plan? So I think that might be a question for Kristen. So Kristen, if you want to come back on set, we'll give you the mic.
Thanks. That's a great question. So the way that NASA views its Artemis program and its current space exploration program is as a big picture where there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle and none of the pieces can complete the puzzle by themselves. So just like NASA is doing research and developing technologies, the commercial partners that we work with, like all the ones that you mentioned in your question and more, a lot of small companies that are up and coming, they're also developing technologies that we're going to need to go back to the moon in 2024. So we're working with all of them, and we are putting out solicitations for technologies, for landers, for payloads on landers, and the commercial crew program that Boeing and SpaceX are working on. Those will be also part of this program, as well as international partners, European Space Agency, and others. So we plan on working with all of these partners to complete our goals. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, hopefully, Amanda, Leslie, if you can let us know if that answers your question. In the meantime, we're going to jump to Lisa. Let's see, she says, thank you, Ann, Kristen, and Amanda. I'm very excited about the flight test and we'll be sharing with all the educators attending the conference. James asked, space habitat for the Orion. Do we have any yet?
Space habitat. So Gateway would, Gateway would play a role in that. The habitat would depend on the mission. So a lunar mission versus a Martian mission. And so no, we don't have a final plan for that yet, but that's part of the technology that's being currently developed by NASA and all the commercial partners. So there's calls out right now where they're doing testing on various versions of habitats. For the Moon 2024 mission, a habitat will not be necessary. So that's part of our sustainable presence that we plan after 2024 and going forward to Mars and other planets.
Okay, all right. And Leslie says, yes, thanks, that did answer the question, so cool. We'll go to Avi Manu. He or she asked, do aerospace engineers need to learn coding languages, like, for example, Python? So
I think I can take that question. There are more and more people that I know in the analysis realm, because, in my role as mass properties, right, we interface with a lot of different loads and dynamics, the structure, the thermal, just to name a few, the computational fluid dynamics, aerodynamics, flight dynamics, and I am starting to see more and more users of Python. And to be honest with you, the students that are starting to come through the center are up to speed on that, and then they kind of have a leg up because they're able to jump right in and go into that. So we do have, various systems and models that we use, but I'm seeing more and more of Python. I think it is becoming more, being able to process data and data analysis is a lot of what we do. So you got to understand the fundamentals of the engineering, that you get in your curriculum, but in practical application, I would say, yes, that's definitely a good skill to have. I wouldn't necessarily say required, but if I recall correctly, it's an open source and constantly evolving and, new parts of it building. So I would say that's a good place to spend your time to make you competitive in the workforce and to be able to contribute to the team and to be able to, process the systems analyses quicker.
All right. We have a couple people typing, so we'll give them a moment to, James said thank you for the answer to his question about the habitat.
And hopefully I answered the question about Python correctly too.
All right. Robert asks, will it be, okay, let me see, make sure. He says, will it be after AA-2 any other test related to the Orion capsule before Artemis 1 mission?
Mm-hmm. Me or you can go? You can start. I'll add.
So Artemis 1 will be the first test of the Space Launch System with the Orion spacecraft together. It'll be uncrewed. And so that is, I believe, the next test of Orion, the next flight test. And then after that will be Artemis 2, which will be crewed, and it will go around the moon and do an orbit. And then Artemis 3 will be the first woman and man on the moon in 2024.
Okay.
And I don't know if there's any other tests.
Well, and I can just add to that, there's a lot of ground testing. So like I was saying, the test versus exam versus quizzes. So like each subsystem goes through extensive testing from, from being on a vibration table shaking to the electromagnetic interface effects, the emissions and compatibility. So there is a lot of ground testing. One example, like SLS, before it goes on Artemis, they'll do a modal test. So inside the vehicle assembly building, they'll put a load and they'll watch and analyze and make sure that they understand the dynamics of how that structure interacts to that force. So those are just to give you some examples. And then the integrated functional testing. So there's a lot of tests, but the ones that, AA-2, Artemis 1, Artemis 2, those are, the main system level tests. But there's, dozens, if not hundreds of other lower level or system or component tests that happen to make these vehicles certified and for launch and make sure they're going to be reliable systems in a harsh space environment.
All right, you'll just have to forgive me because I am monitoring the chat box. I am seeing, so we had, let's see, we have Christine says, thanks so much for doing the seminar. And then Luna asks, is Python the best language to start with, or are there other coding languages that would be more useful?
I don't honestly know if I'm the best person to answer that, but I'll just kind of reiterate what I said previously. I mean, I know when I was in school, it was MATLAB or these others, but I think because Python is open source and I'm starting to see more and more of it, I'm sure there's other companies and other systems out there, but I don't know that I'm the best one to explicitly, ask that question. Maybe I can ask around and maybe we can, I don't know if there's a way to do a follow-up, but I'll just say that's one that comes to mind. Not necessarily that NASA is advocating for that one in particular. It's just one that I've heard of and aware of. And then, in some cases, what we do is so unique that we've developed our own, systems, that had their starts at, NASA. People develop systems, way back when. I'm not going to quote any dates or any names of any software, but, that there was a new need that wasn't already out there. So I just mention that to say there's opportunities out there too.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of add from sort of the educator perspective, I know I was talking to some community college students earlier today, and just because you know one language or another language, or that may not necessarily be the most important. I know there's jobs that specifically require a particular coding language, but the ability to be able to do coding, the ability to problem solve in that manner, regardless of what the language is an asset that would be very helpful to have. So.
Yeah, and I would second that too. Just having general knowledge and knowing what it takes and being willing to just, jump in and tackle hard problems and being able to work with a team to do that as well.
Okay. Lisa's been talking, I think she's doing an Educator Professional Development Institute this week. She says, we have models that are being developed by the educators in our PD this week for sustainable energy and food sources to implement for the 6-month community on the Moon to Mars mission.
So I'm just going to duck this for a little while because they're taking questions, and I'm going to ask if anybody has any questions for them at all. They're kind of gone beyond the Orion Ascent Abort flight test. So there's that.
The person who will be walking on Mars,
I don't have any questions for them.
Like a 5th grader,
and
maybe a 4th
I'm
grader.
kind of
and so yes, thank you to you teachers
wondering
for doing those and for
what kind of a rabbit hole they're going to end up going down. There's not too many participants here, which is kind of nice, but I feel like they're going to
James says, I really
focus on programming from now on.
Monitors.
Yeah, hey Bad Panda Bear, you're coming in just for the end. Good for you for donating platelets. So.
Let's see. So Maria says yes. Luna says great, thank you. And then James says graphic user interface. Olga says thank you. And fantastic. So I think at this point we've gotten all the questions. I apologize if I've missed. The chat box has gotten very busy in the last couple minutes, which is awesome. It's great. I did type my email address in there. If we could cut to the slide just one more time, that way then you can see the email addresses there. Just a quick reminder, post-event surveys will go out. Please complete those. If you don't receive them within 24 hours, please give me an email so that I can troubleshoot why you may not have received that. Complete that, you'll get a certificate of attendance. And just one last plug, please make sure you're online on July 2nd at 7 a.m. to see all of the flight test team's hard work. And hopefully we'll have a successful launch.
Yeah. Okay. Very exciting. Thank you.
So thank you again. Have a great night.
All right. So switch over to the doggos. Actually switch over to this once I tell it that, that's done. Close this. So yeah, that was the webinar for the Orion Ascent Abort test. Towards the end, it was a lot more like educational stuff and these things and that things, because this was for professional development. The first half of it did cover the test and some details that I didn't previously know about the test, which was actually pretty neat. So if you missed it, like I know Bad Panda Bear came in late, catch the video on demand, and this will be archived on YouTube for all of posterity. So let's toss some, Cheerios to the dogs for being good. Paranor says, I just woke up, I missed it. It's okay. It's okay. That's what video on demand is for. Yeah, so I hope that gives you some insight to the Orion AA-2 flight test. And yeah, it is great how they emphasize the educational part of the science that they do at Dolphin. It is nice. NASA can be super awesome for education outreach. It's just not a whole lot of people took advantage of this thing today, and I wonder if it's because of the timing, because it was right around 5 o'clock, which is when most people are leaving. And yeah, that Dolphin ad. Same for this channel, by the way, and all the people involved. Aw, thank you. I try to explain things. I try to explain things in a way y'all can understand them. All right. So, I'm starting to get sleepy myself. Paranor woke up, which apparently means it's time for me to go to bed. Or take a nap, or relax, or whatever. Have some more Cheerios, doggos. I've had coffee. I've had coffee twice today. No more coffee. Yeah. DPI adds, the great thing here is that everyone can explain something. Yes. Yes, because I know there's plenty of times I screw something up and I take zero offense to being corrected, because I'd rather be corrected and remember that correction than just continue spreading bad info. I don't like spreading bad info. So, we had a couple bingos. I think bingo worked out well for this. You know, it kept us, you know, paying attention at least. Drop Periantic says, a good scientist is one that's willing to be corrected. EJ is staying up for the Electron launch. Oh my. Oh yeah, that's right. That is tonight, isn't it? Yes, and I did learn how to edit commands. I will... Oh geez. I guess I better take a nap then, huh? Is EJ streaming now? Because if EJ is streaming now, we can raid him. I think I'll cover the Electron launch, but I don't want to guarantee anything. Because I really might just be too tired. And things of that mean. The launch is not for another 6 hours. More or less. The launch is in another 6 hours, I think. Alright, cool. EJ is streaming. We'll raid him. Because I know EJ does super long streams. And I just don't have... I just don't have that endurance. Are you done? Anyways, correction. The launch is in about 6.5 hours, more or less. It is scheduled for June 27th, 4:40 a.m. UTC. So that's, if I tell you 6 hours, it's close enough. 6 hours, more or less. I should be, yeah, it is much better than the original time. I should be awake for that, I think. I should be awake for that. I don't know. I don't want to make any promises. I'm going to try, but, you know, things happen. Things happen. Favorite Human is off tomorrow. So, yeah, I don't know if we're going to try to go out or not tonight. We'll see. We'll see. Okay, so we got EJ lined up. I'm gonna get credits lined up. Ooh, like on a date? Yeah, maybe. We may not. We're saving money for Vegas. And I told him I was going to make him pizza, so it might be a trip to the grocery store at a Walmart if I can convince him to do that. We might go to a friend's house. Who knows? Yeah. I'm glad you're all amused by Favorite Human. But yeah, we're totally having pizza for dinner tonight because I don't have energy to make anything else. Anyways, Horizon Psy lives in Vegas. Really? That's pretty cool. We'll be in Vegas right around the time of the, like right after the time of the Astro Tour. Because Pamela will be out of town, and then we'll be out of town. So, it's like ships passing in the night, which has happened more than you think. But yeah. But yeah, we're saving money for Vegas, so it's literally frozen pizza in the oven tonight, which there's nothing wrong with that. Alright, so I got credits all lined up, so I guess now, and we know who we're gonna raid, so I guess now it's time to do the wall of text! So this surprise stream was brought to you by PSI, that's Planetary Science Institute, in collaboration with Youngstown State University in Youngstown, Ohio. If you missed part of the stream, we archive everything on YouTube. So yeah, if you missed the video on demand, catch the video on YouTube. We are brought to you by you, so thank you for literally all of your support. Thank you. If you would like to help us grow, inflict us on others. Also, please help us, Matt Benu. Please help us, Matt Benu. Yeah, and I think that's all of my required wall of text things, the super duper teeny tiny version, and I'm gonna hit roll credits, and yeah, as Sammy says, it's nap time. So hopefully I'll see you later. Who knows? All right, bye. And transition.